Good morning, how are you doing? Morning ramble, as usual, from home this time, rather than in the office or out in the lovely park out there. I used to, so for those who don't know, the reason I call them morning rambles is they were basically, started during COVID, and I walked around the local park because you had to get out for an hour, if you remember. And so I walked around the Bushy Park, which is right next to me at the back of Hampton Court Palace, and that was my exercise for the day. And I used to record a little video, just for the sake of actually communicating with humanity at large. And so I then continued, and I do try and make them a little bit about work and a little bit about I don't know, whatever's going on in my world, and see if you appreciate it or not. So yeah, and I know that I've seen some friends actually clicking on this, liking it and commenting, and that's great because that then means that I'm reaching out to old friends and colleagues that I used to work with, or some agents that have found me a job, because I used to be a contractor for about 35 years or so. So I know a lot of agents, and they're on my profile as well. And so sometimes I get old colleagues saying hello and all that. In fact, last night Joe McKee said Happy St Andrew's Day, and he was the only person to do that. And I was thinking to my wife, there's never enough talk about Scotland down here. And then the next thing is just they put on, Happy St Andrew's Day on the radio too. And then they had an evening on my way home later on. They had Radio 2 folk show, and on it was a lot of Cayley music and all that. So okay, alrighty. So we got a bit of Scottish culture here in London. Just a day, that's enough for us, just a bit of token gesture. But who am I to complain? There's no Irish culture down here either, or Welsh culture for that matter. I think they got the BBC News had, it was on the World Cup game, it was this little guy who was brilliant, a little Welsh guy, going, I think Wales we've just made history just getting here. We've not been here for 64 years, and that get a little bit of coverage. But then it was over to, Grealish's school, and interviewed all the teachers and everybody there, and it was for about 2 hours that went on for. It's a little bit imbalanced, I think. And then when England won, obviously it was England won, and there was lots of like banter on the radio and the TV about England winning, etc. And then oh yeah, commiserations to Wales, and that was it. So yeah, I'm with my Welsh and Irish cousins when we always think that it's not the National British Broadcasting Corporation or national television, it's actually London television that we get. So it's harsh reality, but it's true. And even politics are just very London-centric, Westminster-centric. So I'm not surprised that Scotland wants to go independent, and the north of England kind of wants to go independent as well, because they just don't really get their issues resolved by the Westminster government. Bit of politics for you. I didn't want to talk about that, but now I've ended up. So yeah, two things. One is change, and one is Robert Downey Jr. So a film last night I went to see. It's a documentary called Senior, SR. Look out for it. It's on Netflix. I'm not sure if it's out now yet, but Robert Downey Jr. was in the house. So he came over and he was there. A director hadn't arrived yet, but him and a cameraman were actually talking about the making of it. It's about his father. His father was a filmmaker. I didn't know. Many of us didn't know that. But he was an independent filmmaker. Some good quality films, but not mainstream. And in fact, Robert Downey Jr. was in some of them as well. So it was very much a family business, and that's how he grew up. So you get a little bit of that, but also you get an older, frail gentleman who's lovely and warm and characterful, and you see him in his family and his grandchildren, etc. And as he's got Parkinson's, so he's at the twilight zone of his years. And it's quite heartwarming. It's very much what they should have done. Robert Downey Jr. is embracing films, and they're inside the film world. So why not create a film of of senior before he moves on in the world. So yeah, it does. It's good from that perspective. I mean, and it reminds us all. I mean, my parents are passed, but your parents, if you've not spoken to them much about what they've done in their life and who they are, where they've been, and a lot. Now's the time to do it. Find out more. There's a couple of things in my father. I think, well, he was in the Navy, but I don't really know what he did there, and what age he was there. And I'm thinking, so trying to piece that together, I would have liked to have asked more questions. And then on my mother's side, her father passed away in, I think it was 1945. And I'm thinking, was he in the war? Was it at the end of the war? Did he die in the war? And I just think, I've not been able to find out any information on that. So it's like, find out more about your parents while they're still around. And I think senior was a bit like that. It was Robert Downey Jr. going into, learning a bit more about his father and what he did to date, and it was a very, very, very good documentary and worthwhile seeing. Now, and I've got a little bit of clip at the end of him doing the Q&A, and he was in the bar afterwards as well. And I'm thinking, I didn't want to be a selfie guy, like I ended up, all right, how do I get a selfie? I ended up taking one of the back of his head. So I was like, okay, that's no use to me. But Charles Dance was in the audience, and he was there, and Terry Gilliam, two other senior British actors. So it was nice to see them. It was quite and it was a small little bar because you get a little pass afterwards. So, and there was only like 30 people in the bar. It was a bit strange that the 3,000 audience, they all just disappeared, and then there was this little exclusive bit in the bar. So I was assuming that because I was a BAFTA member, I must have got the exclusive bit. But so it's nice to be getting. I do enjoy the BAFTA membership. It's 20 years now, so I'm now at that stage where it is a good part of my life. I enjoy it. I love film, and I love being part of the film community. I like judging film, and as I mentioned before, I've got a judging competition next year in May, and I'm looking forward to that as well. So yeah, it's what I do. I mean, do what you love, I think is the message, isn't it? So that's but you've got to find out what it is you love, and once you find that out, do more of it. Now, the one of the things in the clip, you'll see that the director hadn't arrived because he would flight delays or something like that, and he was on his way in. So there's my segue to the next bit. Change. Sorry about my emails coming in. Busy. I need to get to work in a minute. The change. Now, I remember when I was going to Monaco at the end of September, and I was trying to work out how to explain the change in our program activity towards change planning. You go from project planning, program planning, etc. But at some stage you have to get into change planning. And I couldn't find out how to actually articulate that. I thought, okay, here's. And then I was on a plane. I was up in 30,000 feet, flying off, and I'm looking down. When you get a bit of time to think about the problems you've left behind and how you might articulate that. So I then ended up texting back to the program director and said, look, this is what I'm trying to get at. And it was really about planes coming in to land. Now, at the beginning of your program, you're getting planes to take off. You're trying to get the resources, your designs, your architectures, and you're trying to get the planes to take off, and you get that going, and they actually take off. Fantastic. So hard work at the beginning, getting them up, a little bit of maintaining it through the air, but mostly your people, the people that are actually in your teams, they're actually delivering. They're going in the air. That's their job, to keep it flying through the air. But then the next tricky part comes that when they come into land. In other words, when the change activity that you've been planning all happens at the same time, and that tends to be the norm in any program of work. You've always got all that activity. I mean, obviously you're sprinting, you're doing things, during the project, but towards the end tends to be the big chunky bit, the big migration bit, or the big activity that you've got to deliver. Now that's all about change. Now nobody thinks about change and change planning enough. They just don't. It seems to be, oh, that's something the technical people do. Technical people put in change. No, they don't. It has to be planned and managed and coordinated. And if you don't do that, you're actually going to end up delaying the project, because things coming in, as I put it, if you've got the planes going up, you've got to bring them into land. Now see it from the other side. So you were actually at one side of the airport, with the planes taking off. Now you've got to see it from the other side of how they're going to land and how you're going to coordinate those landings, like an air traffic controller or whatever. But actually planning what's coming in when, has to be so precise. Like the planes come, circling, etc. And as they come into Heathrow, very similar to that. You've got to have a forward look, maybe preferably 8 weeks. We used to, way back in Royal Bank days, we used to have 8-week look aheads. So we actually knew what was coming in for the next 8 weeks in terms of change activity, not program or activity or sprints or anything, but right down at that, what change has to happen when, on the Thursday night, the Friday night, the Saturday, the Sunday, what change is actually coming in. Now, unless you start doing that, you're going to have delays in getting approvals, because everybody needs approval, especially with these days with cybersecurity issues, etc. You've got to get their approval, you've got to get internal stakeholder approvals, business approvals, the number of approvals you have to go through is significant. So you actually have to get all of that happening, all coordinated, while at the same time make sure the order's right as well. So I think they are, and it's not really. I think most programs could benefit from a change planner. Actually, forget a project planner. You're the change planner. Just work out what changes are going to hit the ground when, and that would actually add a lot of value to most programs of work. The other thing you get from that is you get safe and secure change. In other words, you get change that's well thought through, it's been tested, it's been considered as to what the impact would be, and you get a lot better change. So my view of the world is, think like an air traffic controller, start to look at the end game before you even start. Think about the end game, and then refine it as you go through. You'll never know all the details. The last thing you'll have with the detail is perhaps the change record number that goes on right at the end, but you don't need that to actually have a change plan. You can actually have the change plan early as you can, and then further refine that as you get closer to the event, because as soon as you get to the event and you've got all these changes and you haven't thought through it, you haven't forecasted, you haven't got the approvals, etc., that's where it all just comes in like a deck of cards and it just falls apart. So you need to get that done, and you need to go and watch Netflix Senior, Robert Downey Jr. So here's some things I took from the other night there. Cheers.
Start over. Wouldn't that be funny if every half hour someone else came? This is actually this is a piece of performance art we're doing. It's called the Q&A that wouldn't end. I think we're going to have a second meal at 12:30. All right. We'll do a couple more minutes.